I had the convoy's transponder string open on my display when the first false flag went up, irregularity in manifest, logged by a Threll customs cutter that held no registered jurisdiction on that corridor. I remember thinking it was sloppy fraud. I did not yet understand it was a trap already closed. The convoy was Harbor Light. 9 transports, 2 compliance escorts, 6,412 people out of Aubrey's Hollow, 3 failed growing seasons behind them, bound for resettlement at the relay where I sat watch. I had cleared their manifest myself 9 days earlier. Every seal was clean. The Threll cutter legikeeper hailed them at the corridor's narrow point and ordered a hold for inspection under something called the Open Manifest Act. I pulled the statute from the concern's public registry out of habit, expecting boilerplate. It had been filed 4 hours before Harbor Light left dock. 4 hours. Someone had written the crime's justification before the crime existed. I flagged it to the duty officer. He told me to keep working it and stay off the channel. I kept working it. Boarding took 11 minutes. Then Harbor Light's channel dropped to static and the legikeeper logged resistance to inspection, corridor authority engaged. 4 torpedoes did the rest. The escorts got 9 people off between them. The transports got off none. I sat with the casualty manifest for 40 seconds before I started building the case, because that was the only thing I knew how to do with my hands while my hands were shaking. The 9 survivors came in on the escort Marwood's lifeboats, and compliance protocol put their debriefs through me before anyone else, because I'd cleared the manifest and I was the one with standing to confirm identities against it. I matched names to faces I'd only ever seen as data fields. A medic from the second transport told me the boarding party had photographed the children's section of the manifest before the cutter ever hailed them. Not after, before, as if the list of who to count already existed somewhere it shouldn't have. I wrote that detail down twice, in 2 different files, because I didn't trust myself to remember it only once. The forged filing timestamp was the first thread, and it didn't fray under pressure, it unraveled. I cross-referenced the cutter's patrol log against the concern's own shipping registry, and found legikeeper diverted to that corridor 16 hours before Harbor Light filed its flight plan. Not a patrol that happened to be there. A patrol that was placed there, waiting on a convoy that hadn't chosen its route yet. Someone inside the concern had known where Harbor Light would be before Harbor Light did. I took it to the duty officer again. He told me compliance didn't have standing to call it premeditated. I told him I wasn't asking compliance. I sent the full chain, forged statute, prepositioned cutter, the 9 survivors' sworn accounts, directly to Fleet Command at Meridian, and I copied the duty officer on it so he'd know exactly when he'd been overruled. Command's reply came back in under 3 hours, which told me more than the words did. They didn't ask me to confirm the data. They asked me to keep building it because they were already moving. The duty officer found me in the relay's data bay that night and didn't apologize exactly. He asked what else I had. I told him about the photographed manifest section, and about a second cutter, the Tide Line, that had logged a maintenance hold in the same sector 11 hours before legikeeper's diversion, close enough to the corridor to relay the convoy's flight plan the moment Harbor Light filed it, far enough to claim it was coincidence. 2 cutters, one to watch, one to wait. He read the timestamps 3 times and then put his own name on the transmission beside mine, which was the closest thing to an apology he had in him, and the closest thing I needed. I watched the daylight fleet assemble over the next 2 days the way you watch weather pressure building somewhere past the horizon. Nothing dramatic yet, just more ships on the boards every time I looked. 526 hulls staged out of 3 systems, organized into 7 echelons, no fanfare, no broadcast. Earth doesn't grieve out loud. It files paperwork and it moves warships, and from where I sat those looked like the same motion. The concern's diplomatic office sent a note on the second day, expressing regret for the loss of civilian life and requesting a joint review panel to determine fault. I read it twice. It never used the word convoy. It used the word incident. Fleet Command didn't answer the note. They answered the cutter's registry entry instead, with a single transmission to the concern's boundary anchorage, the forged statute's filing timestamp, the prepositioning log, the 9 survivors' names, and one sentence: surrender the cutter's command crew and the official who authorized the filing, or the Daylight Fleet enforces the concern's own open manifest act against every vessel flying Threll colors inside the corridor, beginning at the hour the ultimatum expires. I was patched into the anchorage feed when the concern's response came back. Their administrator called it an unlawful threat against a sovereign trade authority and reasserted jurisdiction over the corridor. He read it like a man certain the conversation had years left to run. It had 11 hours left to run. I watched those 11 hours the way I'd watched the staging numbers on a board, nothing dramatic, until the timestamp rolled over and the Daylight Fleet's first echelon translated into the anchorage's outer marker at a range the concerned sensors hadn't finished resolving. There was no demand for surrender a second time. The ultimatum had already been the demand. What came next was the enforcement of it. I will not pretend I watched all of it. I watched the parts the feed gave me, which were the parts Fleet Command wanted on record. The customs cutters that had logged false jurisdiction over the corridor were disabled in formation, boarded, their crews removed alive and cataloged by name, Ledgerkeeper and Tideline both, taken intact, their command logs seized whole rather than destroyed, because Command wanted the forged filing entered into evidence in the concern's own hand, not Earth's. The orbital tariff stations that processed forged filings were taken offline one at a time, methodically, the way you shut down a building floor by floor instead of burning it. Each echelon reported its objective complete before the next moved, and each report landed on my board within minutes. The corridor's 7 jurisdictional nodes, falling in order, like a ledger being closed line by line. The administrator's own command platform was the last asset touched, and it was touched precisely, disabled, boarded. The man himself taken into custody, reading his own open manifest act back to him from the transcript, paragraph by paragraph, until he stopped objecting to the word premeditated. 526 warships, and in the official log not one of them is recorded as having fired on an unarmed vessel. I checked. That was the part I needed to check most. It took the Daylight Fleet 6 hours to dismantle the Threll Mercantile Concern's entire customs authority along that corridor. Every cutter, every tariff station, every official who had signed a filing in the 90 days before Harbor Light died. By the time the 7th echelon stood down, the corridor wasn't contested anymore. There was nothing left on the concerned side to contest it with. The note that finally went out under Earth's seal wasn't long. It restated the 9 survivors' names. It restated the 9 torpedo impact timestamps against the false jurisdiction's filing timestamp, 4 hours and 11 minutes apart, in case anyone still wanted to argue about which had come first. It closed with the statute itself, the concern's own law, reprinted in full beneath Earth's reply, enforced as written against the writer. I filed the case closed 11 days after I'd opened it. The casualty count didn't change in that time. 6,412, 9 survivors, 2 escorts, 1 forged law. I stamped the file and sent it to the archive, and for a long time after I just sat there with the display dark, because there was nothing left in the queue that needed working, and that silence was the strangest part of the whole 11 days. 3 weeks later, a courier dropped a single line into my queue from the Boundary Anchorage's new administrator, a junior compliance officer the concern had promoted after the old one's transcript went public. It asked, formally, whether Earth required any further filings before reopening the corridor to civilian traffic. I forwarded it to Fleet Command without comment. Command's answer was one word: approved. No further conditions. We had not asked for an apology, and the concern had learned better than to offer one shaped like a regret rather than an admission. They never sent another cutter into that corridor without a flight plan filed first. They never had to be told twice. We had read their own law back to them, word for word, until it meant exactly what it said.